I don't think failures aren't going to go away anytime soon. And at the end of the day, ERP implementations are just always going to be complex and risky. So there's going to be a certain minimum level of risk that's always going to be there regardless of the technology. And kind of along those same lines, there's going to be higher failure rates, continue to be high failure rates of ERP vendors and consultants. And ERP implementations aren't necessarily the things that fail. Oftentimes it's the consultants or the people that you've hired to help with the project. And I think a lot of the problem we've seen in the past is that a lot of consultants are too focused on the technology or the back-end functionality of the software rather than focusing on the things that are really important to success, like organizational change and defining business processes and whatnot. So those are just 2 points, but I know, Michael, when we were kind of going through this, you had an interesting, not necessarily a counterpoint, but just an additional thing to think about as it relates to this slide.
Well, yes, failures are not going away because, generally speaking, if you analyze why projects don't succeed, generally it's not the software that fails. Now, sometimes there's a bug in the software or what have you. Yes, that does happen. But generally, the software more or less does what it's supposed to do. The question is how that software is adapted to the organization in terms of the processes and, as Eric said, the organizational change management and things like that. So the relationship that an ERP buyer has with the consultants and with the implementers is extremely, extremely important. In any ERP purchase, there are generally 3 parties. You have the software vendor, you have the implementation partner or the consultants, and then you have the buyer. And for consultants, the consultants have to be clear on where the priority lies. So is the consulting company focused on churning lots of hours, or is the consulting company focused on getting the right outcomes for the customer? I was an expert witness for Massachusetts did hearings on a large IT failure in the government, and so the state legislature was holding failures, and it was with Deloitte. I don't mean to pick on Deloitte, but they're actually an easy target sometimes to pick on. It was with Deloitte, and the person from Deloitte said, no, this project was successful. And I'm like, my eyes are bugging out. How could this was like millions of dollars over budget. The users hated it. And so when it came time to for me to speak, I said, in what universe is this project a success? And the reason that they could say that it was successful was because the way the contract was written, it was all about process. So if a certain amount of time goes by or we hit certain milestones, we accomplish certain things, then we get paid, but none of that was pegged to any type of business result or business outcome or benefit to the customer or accomplishing. It was all schedule and other process milestones based. And so again, the relationship with the consulting organization is critically important. However, at the end of the day, it's the customer, the buyer, who must take and have accountability for the result, because if the project goes well, then it is the customer who ultimately will gain the benefit. And if the project does not go well, it is ultimately the customer who is going to suffer the greatest pain. And so I think that that success becomes a result of a shared partnership between the customer and the consulting company and even the software vendor as well. That's why these things are so hard, is because you have multiple players.
Right.
And I was going to say that the successful implementations arise out of a strong partnership and collaboration among these various parties.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're if you're an implementing organization, you're the CIO, CFO, project manager, whatever your role is, it's you and your team's responsibility to make sure that that project is successful. If you've got the wrong consultants on staff or the wrong internal team members or whatever the case may be, I mean, it's up to you to make sure you've got the right team in place and you've got the right coordination and interaction between them. I think that's a great point. And I'm going to gloss over the 10th point because it's kind of related to what we were just talking about, and that is the increasing dichotomy between ERP success and failure. So there's companies that are wildly successful, as I mentioned before, and there's those that are massive failures. So, you know, and I think that the key thing there is that there's difference. It's not just coincidence that there's some success and some big failures. If you look at the two subsets of both extremes, there's distinct things that those companies are doing differently, which we could easily spend, you know, a whole another hour talking about. But I think that's another thing to think about. And then you had a bonus prediction for 2015, kind of to augment the 10 that we had, Michael.
Yes, and I'll go through this very quickly because I see that there are some questions. So we were talking about the consumerization of IT, and part of that is the increasing expectations of users that the IT department is going to be responsive, and that means two things. Number one, it means that IT is actually going to give the users, the departments, what they need. And number two is that they're going to do it in a reasonably timely manner, fast enough so that the department can make use of whatever it is that IT is providing. And I think that 2015 is going to be really a watershed year in which, if you're a CIO or you work in IT, this is the time to talk to your customers, your internal partners, talk with them, find out what they need, ask their opinion how you're doing, so that by the end of 2015, you can stand up and say, yep, we're responsive, and even more importantly, you can ask your users, and they'll say, yep, IT is responsive. Now is the time to do it.
Yeah, and I like that prediction too because it's kind of getting back to, you know, what is IT's role within an organization. You know, it's not just about, you know, implementing technology or implementing ERP. It's, you know, you've got internal customers and objectives that you're trying to accomplish for the overall company. So I really like that prediction and statement there.
It's this, Eric, successful IT departments are going to be ever more closely aligned with their user. And if you don't do it during 2015, by 2016, you are just going to be, IT will be devalued very, very heavily. So now is really the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. So what does this all mean to you? I think, you know, as far as some of the takeaways here, for those of you that are thinking about implementing new ERP systems in the new year, the first is to consider independent consulting expertise to guide you through the ERP initiative. It's no secret that Panorama is an ERP consulting or an independent ERP consulting firm. We'd be happy to help you through the selection stage, the implementation stage, whatever cycle you might be in whatever phase you might be within the cycle. You also want to remember the low-hanging fruit that's going to deliver a higher ROI than just an ERP technical implementation. So things like organizational change, business process management, those are two things that stand out as things that will make or break your project, much more so than the software and the technical aspects itself. And then finally, figure out how you want to leverage outside experts and expertise to help your organization from planning through implementation. And you know, make sure you're not doing it all yourself, but also make sure you're not over-dependent on outside consultants. What we found is the best clients are the ones that don't rely too much on us, even though, you know, we make more money in the short term from those clients. Those projects just never go well, or they don't go as well as when the client has kind of a shared responsibility. When we're joined at the hip, we've got equal, you know, responsibilities and equal strengths we're bringing to the table, and we're equally committed to the project. I think that's where you're going to see the most success with your consulting partners. And if you'd like to go back and read the blog that this whole webinar is based on, you can do that by going to the link in front of you, or just go to our homepage and do a quick search for 2015 predictions, and you'll find that blog there.